What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a casual conversation with myself, Jeremiah, and James. Hey, James.
What's up?
Okay, so this time we have something kind of unique to talk about.
It's not that much more unique than last time.
This is pretty out there, man.
Conspiracy theories was pretty out there too.
Yeah, but this is not like everyone knows a conspiracy theorist. To a lot of people, this is going to sound like, what? Why? No, of course not. What we want to talk about today is the question, are we living in a computer simulation? James, pretend I'm an idiot. Try real hard. What is the 5,000 foot view of the idea that we're living in a computer simulation?
Okay, so the original argument was that, our brains could be just, connected in a vat and everything we experience is fake, essentially. But as time went on, an actual kind of different argument was made in regards to technology. Basically, it says if mankind lives long enough, we will have the technology to build a simulation that would be so real that its inhabitants would not have a clue that they're living in a simulation. So I don't have the breakdown of the different points. Actually, I'll pull it up just in case.
Well, obviously.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. All right, sorry, go ahead.
The simulation argument.
Yeah.
The fraction of human-level civilizations reach a post-human stage, that is one capable of running high-fidelity ancestor simulations, is very close to zero. Or these are the different. It has to be one of these has to be true.
Okay.
So that it's close to zero. Number two is the fraction of post-human civilizations that are interested in running ancestor simulations is very close to zero. Or the fraction of people with our kind of experiences that are living in a simulation are very close to 1. So basically, as I said, it's saying that if we live long enough, technologically, we'll come to a place where we would have the ability to run ancestor simulations, which is basically saying that we could run a simulation, can't talk, of what civilization would be like before us.
Like the Animus from Assassin's Creed or like the Matrix is the obvious comparison.
Yeah. I mean, the difference being from the Matrix, though, is that the Matrix is supposed to be an interconnected, everybody's brains feeding it, and there's, conscious involvement. This is more along the lines of playing Sims. Imagine if, Sims number 25 comes out, and when you create your little world, they each have their own personalities, their own thoughts, and they build on each other and continue to build.
So instead of it just being
to
a game,
the point you don't play the game, the game plays itself. And that's kind of the idea behind an ancestor simulation, is that you're setting up a scenario where you can see how it plays out.
Which is interesting. For me, the first thing that jumps out, we'll get to the plausibility of it, but the first thing to me that jumps out is it seems like a really interesting way to test out hypotheses or do research. Like maybe we're all here solving cancer. Let's say we live in a simulation. Maybe in our simulation, there's 1,000 different diseases that kind of fall under the heading of cancer.
Right.
And we have many, many scientists working on the cure for cancer. Well, maybe that's because we're one simulation, and there's some post-human society that is close to immortality except for this one pesky illness. So they've created a simulation with just variations of this illness, and they're letting us try to figure it out. Maybe the past 5,000 years of human research has taken place in the space of a day or something. They're just running a super speed simulation to see if we can figure out the problem. Would that
But time is relevant to us.
Right, exactly. But it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because we're not real. Would that be the idea?
Yeah. That would be kind of the idea. Yeah.
I mean, I could see a benefit of that.
It's once you start getting your head around it, it's pretty amazing to think about. I mean, not that I want to be living in a simulation or think that we are.
If I'm going to live in a simulation, I'd want it to be a better simulation.
Why can't I fly? Damn it! Where's the hack code?
I more meant why does it have to be a simulation with so many wars? Seems like too many variables.
I mean, setting up a scenario where everything works together perfectly doesn't give you any kind of scientific input. And so allowing flaws to happen, allowing the variables to act as they would give you way more information to pull from. I mean, it's like beta testing. You don't want that everything to go out, everybody just does the same exact thing and it runs smoothly. You want to see the people that do have issues. You want to see the people that do break your system, so that you know what you need to fix before it's officially released.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, I mean, you're collecting all that data, from an outside perspective. If I were looking at humans, you could be looking at how, catastrophic events affect cultures and how they, build certain ways and where they migrate to during those events and stuff. But that's kind of like a view of, oh, humans are the reason why the simulation's happening, not the entire universe. I mean, I think everybody's important. I think my life is important, or I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't because I'm tired.
Yeah, I've been on vacation with you. I'm not sure you think your life is important.
It's not important until at least 11 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
But when you start doing the math of how many, let's go back a few hundred years.
Okay.
They didn't even know that other planets existed until the telescope was invented.
Mm-hmm.
Everything they knew was there were stars in the sky, and there were some that didn't have the same path as others, but they didn't necessarily know what they were until, the telescope really let them see what that little dot was. And then as they got more powerful telescopes, they saw more planets. But even for the longest time, we were the only galaxy in existence. And then we realized that, holy crap, we're not even like the center of our own galaxy. We're just kind of like a side tail.
Yeah.
Out of, millions and billions and trillions of different galaxies, each with trillions and billions of stars and billions of planets each for each star. So it's crazy that if the scenario was something that were true, what kind of information they'd be getting from it.
I mean, are we like one neuron in a brain, in a simulated brain? I guess that would be.
I wonder. I mean, I think about Men in Black 2. Spoiler when they open up the locker door.
Oh yeah. I was thinking of the quote from Men in Black 1. I really like the quote. I can't remember it exactly. It's just a dumb comedy movie, but I really like the quote. It says 500 years ago, everyone was absolutely positive the earth was flat. And yesterday you were absolutely positive that we were alone in the universe.
Yeah.
Just think about what you'll know tomorrow. And I think, I've mangled the quote. So based on my understanding of this topic, which is tenuous at best, if we're in a simulation, we don't have bodies somewhere plugged in like in the Matrix, right? We would just be
not necessarily according to simulation argument.
Okay,
I mean, that's different. That's different than, yeah.
Are you a fan of the Matrix?
I'm a fan of Matrix 1.
Well, yeah, obviously. But
2 and 3,
correct me if I don't remember this. But it wasn't a huge plot hole with the Matrix movies that, these humans, they're plugged in for energy, right? Like they're
yes.
Right. But it's going to cost more energy to power the humans than they're going to get out of the humans, right? Was that ever addressed?
I don't know, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, who knows what they were gaining from the humans?
My understanding was it was just, they had them in a simulation to keep them happy, but my understanding was they were just getting power out of them. I'm sure Ben will write in and explain all that, but honestly, it's been so long since I've seen them, I don't remember. To me, that type of simulation wouldn't make any sense, because then you're going through a lot of work to keep a more or less useless physical body alive. Mm-hmm. But, if we have only ever experienced the simulation, we wouldn't know that our bodies weren't real. Like you mentioned earlier at the beginning, eventually we should hit a point where we can create a simulation so real people don't know they're in a simulation. I would say if you create a simulation and then someone only ever experiences the simulation, I mean, that'd be pretty easy. Like, that seems pretty doable. Like, if you were born and you only ever wore VR goggles from the time you were an infant, and they showed you that the world was like, I don't know, cell shaded or something. As far as you know, that would be the world, right?
Right.
I mean, this is obviously very hypothetical, but so if we are in a simulation, it does feel real because we don't know what actual real is. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's just, that's so trippy to think about.
Well, I mean, I think about the fact that, look at the power of computers now compared to the powers of computers 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what did we have 100 years ago?
Abacus.
Yeah, exactly. In that short 100 years, we've seen flight, we've seen computers that, originally had big cards you had to put in and stuff like that, to shrinking down to being able to get a computer more powerful than 10 years ago in a watch. To me, it's crazy that, technology is leaping that far. We're getting self-driving cars. We're learning all kinds of stuff about particle physics. We're getting closer and closer to quantum computing. To me, it's not that big of a leap to think in 100 years that our computing power is going to be unimaginable. Like, we literally right now could not imagine where it will go, where our technology will be in 100 years, based on the last 100 years.
I would agree with that. And see, so we're like, to me, this whole idea, it seems pretty plausible. I think a hybrid version of it is like definitely going to happen. And I'm not sure about the complete, like, we are just bytes on a drive somewhere. I'm not like 100% sure about that, mostly because I don't feel like I can fully wrap my brain around understanding it. But what I think is absolutely going to happen is, have you read Ready Player One?
Not yet.
Okay, it's really good. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Like, it's talked about a lot.
By Joel.
Okay. It's good. It's definitely good. I listened to the audiobook. It was pretty enjoyable. But in it, and this isn't a spoiler, people, like, they jack into this game almost like jacking into the Matrix, but they kind of wear VR goggles and set themselves up in these nice, interaction chair things, and they do stuff. Now, they have, people have like jobs, people still live in the real world, cooking and cleaning and doing whatever else, but people attend to school, and then people attend all their white collar jobs and everything inside this game, because it's more than a game. It's like, Second Life type thing.
Right.
And I think that's absolutely going to happen, because, I mean, think of, remote work has become a thing, and you have like communication apps like Slack and Google Hangouts calls and everything. So you can have a virtual office, even if you're thousands of miles apart in different time zones and everything. People, thousands or millions of people work in virtual offices already, and it just kind of evolved that way. So once VR goggles are a ubiquitous part of society, which I think they're probably going to be, like, it seems like it's really catching on. They're being used for all kinds of things, and they're not even really fully developed. I think you'll definitely have offices, like companies that just issue VR goggles, and people attend meetings and walk through building sites and attend conferences and stuff from the comfort of their own home or from a public jack-in spot. I mean, to me, I think that could happen like within the next 15 years.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think like in 100 years, to me, what's crazy is that the way our eyes take in light information, and our images look different than animals and stuff like that, because we take in different light wavelengths.
Right.
But our brain takes that information, bouncing it upside down, and automatically corrects it to see in our brain properly.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever heard of people having, like a tumor or something like that, or certain brain disorders like schizophrenia, the ability to see something that's not there.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about that, and I think about 100 years from now, what's to say we won't have an implant that would not be able to build that office without actually having to physically see it, but it's there in our mind in such a way that we believe we're actually seeing it right in front of us.
Without any goggles. You don't need goggles because you're not letting your eyes see it. You're connected to your brain. So blind people,
your brain's telling you it's there.
People with astigmatism, like everybody can see the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that seems really plausible. Like that doesn't seem that ridiculous. Now, of course, we're not people who do research on the brain,
ethical issues in it. But I see that happening.
I don't think there's any ethical issue with developing the technology.
No, but people
but
say,
nobody who's ever developed the
brain.
technology has probably ever thought that either.
What could go wrong? I'm just smashing some atoms.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, I just want to learn how to split an atom, guys. I don't really see what the big deal is.
So with that in mind, that kind of technology that could happen in 100 years, I mean, say humanity lives on for 500, 1,000, 5,000 more
we
years.
make another 500 years. We're doing all right.
Yeah. Imagine at what point we would create a simulation. I can't say that word. I want to say simulation.
Come play Simulation 5.
I mean, that's technically what we're going for here. So I want to see how physics works, and I create a little micro Big Bang and just let it play out. I plug in how much energy comes out of that, and it just starts doing its thing, and it starts forming stuff, and things start happening. Who's to say eventually those things won't lead to some form of semi-life that thinks they're thinking? I mean, we're not talking about technology now, but in 500 years, we have no idea. 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now, I think it's that capability of technology is almost inevitable, especially with quantum computing around the corner.
That's something I really liked about Interstellar, and I think a lot of people considered it to be a plot hole. But I mean, I love the movie so much, maybe my mind just fills in the blanks and makes it reasonable. But near the end, when they're talking and they're in that library,
mm-hmm.
and they're talking about how does this work? How does any of this work? How are we connected across space and time? And Matthew McConaughey says, well, I don't know. But someone in the future knows. Humans, or like whatever came after humans, whatever we turn into, they figured it out. And all that matters is they can talk to us, so we don't have to understand. And that's kind of an interesting idea. Think of like, it seems so far-fetched, but we can maybe conceptually wrap our minds around it. But
it's hard because
it could have already happened. It could have happened 10,000 years ago. Or it could be happening 10,000 years in the future, or 500 years in the future. But there's no real way to know, because we have such little point of reference. Just, human recorded history is what, one notch on the pole of time. So, sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that got me thinking about this,
mm-hmm.
And I always think about most random crap. I was listening to a conference with Neil deGrasse Tyson on Isaac Asimov, and one of the guys there was talking about how when you look at string theory,
mm-hmm.
the mathematics that builds the hypothesis of string theory, they've noticed that it has like something that is almost exactly like a self-correcting computer code built into the formula, which, obviously boggled Neil deGrasse Tyson's mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting. I mean, yes, mathematics pretty much makes up our entire universe if you break it down to math. But math is just another language of explanation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it necessarily is a thing, but I found it really interesting that they were able to see that kind of code, like this code pattern that matched something that would kind of fill in the blanks when there's an issue, keeps from deviation, kind of like our brain does. Our brain masks so much of the input that's coming in, which is why, we're so good at seeing patterns in things as opposed to seeing the imperfections. We see the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if you've ever been tired and saw something in the distance, and mistook it for something else.
Oh, sure. And I mean, we know our brains fill in information all the time and, kind of lie to us just for whatever's convenient.
Well, I mean, but it's a mechanism that keeps us surviving. The filling those blanks, keeping us from seeing what's behind the curtain,
mm-hmm.
is a good thing. And I was thinking about this. I was talking to Joel, we only know what we have senses for.
Mhm.
Like, I wouldn't know visual things exist without eyes. Like, I just wouldn't know. I wouldn't know that sound exists without my ears. I might feel the effects of something making sound, but I would have no clue that sound waves exist.
You wouldn't know it was a thing because you couldn't experience it.
Right. I wouldn't know. I without smell, I wouldn't be able to smell. Without touch, I wouldn't be able to know that physical things, or at least how I perceive them, are there. So, but that's just one of the things that my brain's allowed me to pull in because I have those input things. And there's, things that I don't have the capability of knowing that, who knows? I mean, we know what we know.
Something that, to me, and again, for anyone who's listening to this who actually really understands this theory, I hope I'm not stepping all over your toes. James understands it better than I do. But
it's a hypothesis.
Well, sorry.
Stepped on my toes.
Sorry, the hypothesis. You've heard of like freak accidents where someone like gets a concussion or something, or goes into a coma and then can speak a new language. That they should not know, or people like have had accidents and then, they come out of a coma and can suddenly play the piano.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's been enough documented cases of that happening that it's definitely a thing. Like, it's not common by any means, but there've been a handful of times where that's happened. Is there a chance that like that's like the record player jumping at groove or something? A neuron fires the wrong way and they learn something.
Deja vu.
They learn something in a wrong. Yeah, like in the Matrix, like deja vu. It's like, it seems like a funny coincidence, but if you understood how the system worked, you realize, oh, that's actually just an accident. Yes, you could know that. You're just not supposed to for whatever reason. And oopsie, we made a mistake. I mean, to me, that stuff like that gives a little bit of credibility to the idea of, like you said, there's more that we would totally be able to see and understand, or sense and understand, but we don't have the sense for it. Maybe purposefully. Maybe the neurons are all around us. The code, wherever it is all around us, but we just can't sense it because we purposefully don't have senses for it.
Who knows? Our brains are filling in all the gaps for us that we need to make it through the day and survive.
I mean, your brain is consciously filtering out your nose from your eyesight all day long. So there's no telling what else it's doing that you're not aware of. Did you know when you listen to MP3s, do you ever get tired when you listen to MP3s or like low quality compressed music?
I listen to hi-fi.
Oh, okay.
Just kidding. No, I never noticed that.
If it doesn't, not everybody perceives it the same way. Just like judder on a TV that's running like the wrong refresh rate, not everybody can tell. But if you can, it's really annoying. Well, some people get like really fatigued listening to low quality MP3s, and that's because there's a lot of detail missing. There are chunks of music missing, but your brain knows how to fill those chunks in. And that's how it can be compressed down to such a small size, is your brain is filling in the gaps, and it sounds totally normal, but it will be tiring to some people, because their brain is actively filtering it. So
I can see that, especially like with refresh rates. Refresh rates with a monitor and what it can do for, with your eye fatigue and stuff.
So I'm just really throwing stuff at the wall here, but what if like people who are affected with maybe a certain mental disorder or physical disorder or something, what if it's because their brain has a harder time filtering out something that we're not aware of? It's always plausible.
Well,
again,
I mean,
I'm really throwing stuff at the wall, but like if you want to treat this like a conspiracy theory, there's lots of evidence out there.
We are all connected on the internet, so it's possible. Yeah, I don't know. I think that has more to do with how our brains act. I mean, our brains are little microcomputers. They're just little organic carbon-based computers that just take in so much information
and throw away 99% of it. I mean,
yeah.
We're not aware of 99% of it, whether or not the brain's throwing it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think of like walking to the street. My brain is taking in everything around me, every sound, every smell, every color, 5 minutes later, it's gone. Like I might remember passing one building that I thought about, but it's in and out. It's just wasted. And every noise that you hear is just, it's very much in and out. And we don't care. So it doesn't get stored anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Some brains are more like RAM than they are hard drives.
Really, really razor sharp until it was 5 minutes ago. And I'm like, what? So let's turn this in a fun direction here.
All right.
Or possibly super depressing direction, I guess. So let's say Earth is a simulation, or this universe is a simulation. But to be fair, for all we know, it could be Earth or just this solar system, because we've never physically been outside of the solar system. So what do we know,
Right.
It's possible all that could be simulated past it. So let's say we're a simulation. What are we here to do? I have my theory. If we're in a simulation, what problem are we solving, or what question are we answering by being here?
I would say some kind of long-term effect on something. Honestly, it could be radiation, because that's something that's just always constantly been there.
And we don't really understand, and it might be killing millions of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Heck, we could be here just for the test the magnetosphere of our planet. Even more like crappy, we could just be here to test the orbital patterns of planets and stuff like that. We're just along for the ride.
My theory would be, okay, so what is the single greatest thing that will keep us from being around in 1,000 years?
Donald Trump.
As a society, like the entire world, what's the single biggest threat to the world?
Well, I mean, I think there's at least two.
Okay, what are the two?
One would be war.
Uh-huh.
And two, actually, let me say three. Two would be we just don't handle widespread illnesses well.
Okay.
And three would be, I would think, potentially famine.
My guess is resources, that we would be a simulation studying whether or not
That's a good one.
A population can become resource independent of the area they're in. So like, can we become independent of the Earth's resources before we've used them up? Because most wars come down to resources, whether it's the land that my forefathers came from or whatever. People want more of something.
Right.
Almost no war has ever been fought to go beat somebody and then just leave them and go back home. Like you take their stuff. Like resources are a driving factor for almost everything we do. Survival.
Mm-hmm.
And resources are one of the major components of survival. So what if we're here to see if we're able to harness the power of a solar system, of an infinite array of galaxies before we've used up everything that's on this tiny little speck?
Yeah. I mean, I think of Interstellar, and of any civilization being at the point where they would be studying that kind of stuff. It's, start running simulations to find out what can we do, what do they do,
mm-hmm.
or if we do it this way, what happens.
What do you do? Well, like in Interstellar, if there was a famine and it wiped out most of our food crops, how would you solve that problem? Maybe
GMOs.
So, maybe you start a simulation, like you said, do a tiny little Big Bang in a computer simulation and then just let it run on like 1,000,000x speed until you get some answers. Or what if you could take like a snapshot of the Earth as it is? Let's say the Earth is real, let's say we're in the real universe and we need to create a simulation to solve some dire catastrophe,
mm-hmm.
some catastrophic problem that's come up. What if we create a snapshot of the world exactly as it is today, or the whole solar system or the galaxy, or however much it takes to ensure that the world will, the simulation of the world will continue much like it would for us. Mm-hmm. Then create 1,000,000 copies and run 1,000,000 virtual machines, each running one of these copies, and set them up running as fast as you can and see who gets a solution first.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be the most practical application of it.
Yeah.
Think about every politician or government would want to have millions of these machines running to test out like any strategy or political theories. I mean, there's lots of good things you could do, lots of terrible things you could do, but there's lots of good things you could do.
I mean, we talk a lot about artificial intelligence and worrying about it becoming sentient.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that far-fetched to think that if you program it with enough information, your program itself could become sentient, or at least it feels sentient to the subjects inside your simulation.
And then we end up in a Skynet type situation where the created subjects decide that we're the problem. So a person creating a smart simulation, our society creates a smart one, would create it just like the simulation we live in now, where we're not aware of it being a simulation, so we're not trying to push that particular box.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're pushing it in theory, but none of the people, like, does anyone have tests for how to determine we're in one?
No, that's the thing. There's literally no way to prove you're not living in a simulation. But there's obviously no way to prove that you are necessarily.
Well, I mean, people like try to prove time travel's not a thing by saying like, well, if time travel ever becomes real in my lifetime, I'll come back to right now. And then they don't show up in a minute. You're like, oh, well, obviously time travel's not going to be real in our lifetime. For all we know, time travel will be real, but that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
So who knows that any test we come up for living in a simulation, well, I mean, maybe we only understand 2% of the pie. So we can't create a test. Like we can only test something that falls into the limited, maybe falls into the senses that we can perceive. And maybe 8 dimensions removed from us, it's totally obvious that it's a simulation. But we're just not high enough beings to know.
One of the things that was said about it, I thought was pretty interesting. Making a real universe is hard. Making a computer simulation is not hard, especially given enough technology.
Depending on your definition of a good simulation, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you create what defines good simulation?
I don't know.
In your perspective, if we had no arms and walked upside down, would that be a bad simulation?
I don't know. Be interesting.
I mean, if that's all society has ever known, would it be any different? I
mean, think about it this way. We're pretty happy walking around on our own 2 feet, but there are creatures that swim and creatures that fly and everything else. So who's to say that we don't have one of the inferior forms of mobility or something else, but we're so used to it that obviously we think our way is superior.
Yeah. So I don't think there's necessarily a simulation scenario. Like, I mean, if you got to the point where sentience could happen, I don't think there's a scenario where it's a bad simulation. I mean, it could suck for those things, but
they don't know.
They wouldn't know.
Huh.
I mean, if I were making a simulation and I want it to be perfect, I wouldn't have volcanoes and, I wouldn't have plates that shift and radiation that comes out of the sky and gives you skin cancer from just being outside.
Or the entire ocean, right?
Yeah, I'd get rid of the ocean. The ocean is bullshit.
Just unlimited water fountains.
Yep. All fresh water.
All fresh water. Just solve that problem. That's an entire ecosystem we don't care about.
We can put salt somewhere else where we need it. Put it in the pyramids.
But yeah, unless our simulation, if we're in one, unless our simulation is simulating something like fighting over resources, it does make you wonder, like, why is our simulation the way it is? Because it feels awfully inefficient. It feels like whatever we're here to test, there's a whole lot of noise affecting our ability to test it.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Again, that puts a perspective on us. What if we're not part of the what they're testing?
Wait, what if we're just like bystanders?
Like if I were a bug sitting on a test track and got run over by a car, I would, say I had, my thoughts now, like, why did this happen to me? What was the purpose of all this? Well, that was inconsequential. That was just something that happened. But really what was happening was they were testing this car for, cornering and stuff like that.
And I was just there, and that's my problem.
Yeah, essentially. So, I mean, anything could be tested if, when you consider the size of our freaking universe, who knows, maybe we're just one of millions of societies that are out there. Maybe we're the only ones that have advanced intelligence. Maybe we're the only life in the universe. We don't know. But if in that scenario, it's tough to not want to feel like it's created based on how I'm going to react.
Right. But that doesn't really make sense given that we're on one tiny little planet orbiting a tiny sun in one little corner of one galaxy. Like it wouldn't really make sense, like, unless we don't understand it. Why put us there? Like it seems very inconsequential.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Do you think we're living in a simulation? Is it plausible at all?
I mean, it's definitely plausible.
Like, is it more plausible now that we started talking about it than it was 30 minutes ago?
Let's say, is it more plausible than, let's pick something else to compare it against.
Okay.
To put it in context, what could it be more plausible than? More or less plausible than?
I think it's more plausible than everything being completely the construct of my mind.
Okay.
Or your mind.
Okay.
For that matter. I mean, there's the thought that, I mean, maybe that's true also. I mean, with quantum mechanics, it may as well be true, but things don't necessarily happen unless they're observed.
Right.
I think that it's even more plausible than that, but who knows?
I'll agree with that one. That makes sense. So the proverbial, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, did it make a sound or did it actually fall?
Right.
Would that be the simplest description of
that
quantum mechanics?
That would be the simplest, but basically on quantum mechanics, the fact that I was going to observe it
caused it to fall.
Then caused it to fall.
So
not necessarily as it was happening, but after the fact. So it's a complete mind. Yeah.
So
mind F.
So is this more or less plausible than that?
I find myself saying it's easier to subscribe to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about plausibility. I don't know if I can speak to that, but it makes more sense to me. Just, every once in a while you get that feeling that this is just weird. This is just a weird, life is really weird. My experience is just it's just weird. I don't know if you ever get that feeling, but just...
Yeah, I mean, you can just...
Every once in a while I think back at a conversation or I think of something I've created, I'm like, this is just really weird. This doesn't feel...
And what that probably is that you just not understanding something, but not knowing that you don't understand it.
Right.
Like something's just wrong and you're not really sure what's wrong, but it's not so wrong that it's jumping out to you like, that is wrong. It's just something is wrong, like a gut feeling. And, okay, here's a good way to tie it in. Gut feelings are a real thing. And that's when your brain is observing data that you are not consciously aware of, but it's telling you a verdict or giving you information based on things it's observing and then just not telling you about. It's not telling you about all the observations. It's trying to tell you a result. So when you get a gut feeling about stuff, it could be wrong, but a lot of the times, people say, go with your gut. What's your gut feeling? And your gut feeling can be very correct, even though you're not really aware of why you feel that way. And
do you know why it's a gut feeling?
Why it's called gut feeling or what?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
You actually have neural connections between your brain and your stomach. So it's almost like you have like a small brain in your stomach, which is why you're...
A small brain somewhere else, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine ain't that small. No, I'm just kidding. Which is why you like have food cravings and stuff like that, because it's interacting with, the flora and stuff in your stomach and you crave stuff. It's like, why am I craving this? But that's why you get the gut feeling. That's why when you have anxiety, you might get an upset stomach and stuff, is because that you do have those neural connections, which is pretty fascinating to me.
That is interesting. Huh. Yeah. So what do you guys think? Are we living in a simulation? Is it plausible? Is it more plausible than, say, quantum mechanics? And if we do live in a simulation, what is one thing that you think doesn't make sense about the simulation? in your tiny simulated mind, how do you feel like the simulation really just isn't meeting your needs?
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll join you next time. If you want to make a suggestion for a serious or semi-serious topic for James and I to cover, go ahead and do it. Throw it in the comments section or send us a message or something, and if we think it's interesting, we might talk about it in the future. But until next time, stay casual.
And stay real.
Well, I don't think they have the choice. You are or you aren't. Or are you?